Well, this was probably the most disappointing movie I've seen so far this year. Guess we have to talk about it. Kingsman: The Golden Circle is of course the sequel to Kingsman: The Secret Service, a film that I absolutely love. The Golden Circle, however, not so much. Like I said, this is probably the most disappointing movie I've seen all year. And it's not the worst movie, but the most disappointing movie, for sure. Now, it's a sequel. Now, Eggsy, played by Taron Egerton, is a super spy. He's part of the Kingsmen. He's elite. An assassination/capture scenario almost happens at the beginning of the film. It's this car chase that you see in the trailer. And suddenly, almost all of Kingsman is completely wiped out in one blow. You see this in the trailer as well. And now Eggsy and Merlin played by Mark Strong again, are the only ones left, and now they have to work together, figure out what's going on, and they have to team up with their American cousins, the Statesmen, figure out what's going on because there's an evil person played by Julianne Moore who's doing evil stuff, and they gotta stop her. I'm not going to talk too much about it because the plot is something that is really damn dumb and really bad in this film. And I'm going to have to talk about it in the bad section of this movie review. Okay, so The Kingsman: The Golden Circle is a very tough movie to review, especially for me, because there are things in this movie that I absolutely love. Things that I think are done great. But almost everything else in this movie is done in a very meh level or just plain dumb and stupid. And it's really hard to balance those. It's like, okay, is this an average movie or is this a bad movie? Because there's a lot of terrible stuff in it, but there's a lot of great stuff as well. And there's also the disappointment level, because if you're really disappointed in this movie, it can cloud your judgment and think, well, that's just a plain bad movie. Well, is it really a bad movie? Or was it just me being really disappointed? So I have to ask myself that as I review this movie. Let's get to the goods first, because there are really great things in the movie, I think. The action. This is an action movie, an action comedy movie. Action is the best part of this movie by far. Every action sequence was handled well. There are moments where the action is quick and not that much happens, but at the same time it was done in a style that was really gratifying and nice to watch. It's a visual pleasure to watch these action sequences in the movie. Now, do any of the action sequences compare to any of the ones in the first one? Nope. They come close, but none of them match the same level, and none of them are better than any of the action sequences in the first one, at least that I can recall. But it's still good, it's still watchable, it's still really fun to watch these action sequences. But there's also a little bit of mixed things that I have about it as well, because the first one was ultra violent. It was brutal, and in that same sense, it was fun and really funny to watch some of these action sequences. This one, all the brutality, the ultra-violence of the first one is completely tame in this film. Yes, there is a moment that a lot of people find sick and revolting, and a lot of people are complaining about the ultra-violence of this movie just because of one scene. And honestly, I don't think it justifies it, because this one scene really wasn't all that shocking to me. It's... Okay, I don't think I'm going to spoil it too much. It involves a meat grinder, a person, and a hamburger being eaten, and it didn't really gross me out that much. A lot of people were grossed out in the theater, and all they're going to remember of the ultra-violence is probably that scene, but it's done in a way that doesn't feel all that ultra-violent, at least compared to the first one. in honesty, a lot of the violence in Kingsman: A Golden Circle feel like a really high-end PG-13 rather than an R film. If it wasn't for the cursing in this film, this probably would be a hard PG-13 or a very soft R. That's really disappointing compared to the first one. So, about the action sequences, yes, they're fun, they're vibrant, they're awesome, but at the same time they could have done a lot more. The camera work. I like the camera work in the movie, especially during the action sequences, when it does sort of that action sequence of the church fight scene in the first one, the shootout in the church / fight with Colin Firth. It does that same camera movement of it kind of jarringly zooming in and out and twisting around. And it does that for pretty much every action sequence in this film, and I like it. It's stylized, and a lot of people probably wouldn't like it, but it's way better than the type of films where it cuts almost every split second during a fight scene, and you can't figure out what the hell's going on. It has that sort of chaotic feel of those types, but also still feeling fluid enough where it feels like a one-take, one long shot of an action sequence. It has a bit of the best of both worlds of those types of fighting sequences, and I liked it. It's not everyone's style, but I enjoyed it for the Kingsman: The Golden Circle. At that same time, there's a few transitions with the camera work that I feel completely style over substance and completely unnecessary to sort of drag the runtime of the film. Like, for instance, there's this one really crazy, just why is that in the movie, transition where it zooms into a bag of, I think it's pot, it's green, it's some green drug, I'm guessing it's pot, I don't know my drugs, zooming into that, and then it turns into a jungle, and then we zoom through the jungle towards this hollowed out volcano, this hollowed out dead volcano, and at the base of it you see this sort of 50s town style, this 50s style town. It zooms all the way through till it gets to the 50s diner at the very end, and that's when you find out that's the headquarters of the main villain of this film. Yeah, she's obsessed with the 50s. And so while I do feel that the action and the camera work of this film is the best part of the film, it still has moments where it's a mixed bag for me. So what else can I say is good about the film? Acting is completely fine. There's a few actors in this movie that go above and beyond, while others just are completely fine and okay. There wasn't really as much people that I can say is bad, but for the most part, everyone was completely fine. The standouts for me, Taron Egerton as our main character, as Aggie. He was still great in the movie. I can understand him getting on the nerves of some people because he still has that sort of cocky, just arrogant self. But there's also moments where there's genuine heart to him, and he does actually have a fondness for a character in this movie. He does actually have a romance that is fine for the most part in the film. So I think he was good in the movie. I think he was great. Mark Strong has his moments that's good. Colin Firth has his moments that are good. And surprisingly, he wasn't put in the poster. I don't think his name's on the poster. He's shown a lot in the trailer, but I don't think his name is shown in the trailer either. Pedro Pascal's in this. He's the one person that you keep seeing in the trailer that doesn't have a name attached to him when the end of the trailer happens. He sort of looks like Burt Reynolds, and he's really good. He's good in almost everything I've seen so far. I've seen him as the Viper in Game of Thrones. I saw him as a comic relief character in The Great Wall. And I've seen him as our side main character, or like secondary main character in Gold. And he was great in all those films. He has a moment where he shines at the end of the film, and he's great. Action sequences are really good with him. He's my favorite new character of the film, which is kind of unfortunate when it gets to the end. And for the most part, every other actor was completely fine, but a lot of them were completely underutilized. Jeff Bridges pretty much plays himself in a lot of the movies he's been playing, are the same typical cowboy type character that he has been in the last couple movies he's in. but he's fine. Channing Tatum's in the movie, he's good. Unfortunately, after the action sequence and after a bit of expository scenes, he gets cut out of the movie pretty much, except for scenes where he's drugged out and comatose. That's about it. Most of the scenes in the movie, he's comatose or dancing like a loon. That's about it for Channing Tatum. Other underutilized characters, Halle Berry. She's like the tech character. She's the Merlin character of The Statesman, and she barely has any scenes. And hell, they try to force a character arc for her character, which is completely unnecessary because she's such a small portion of this movie. And it's one of the side characters that didn't need a character arc, but they give it to her anyway. And it just feels forced and sudden and doesn't feel like it goes really anywhere. I mean, it goes in the predictable route, but at the same time, it's like, okay, why is that in there? Did we need it? Was that necessary? Honestly, her character could have been cut out of the film. Other than, it would have been hard to explain why they don't have a tech person, but honestly, I can't think of anything major that she does in the movie that warrants her character. And another great thing about the movie is the score. When it's the original score of the movie it's the same score, I believe, from Kingsman: The Secret Service. When it's playing during the action sequences, it's good. And now there's this one action sequence when it's a Stateman fighting, when it's Pedro Pascal shooting all these bad guys in Italy. And when the Kingsman score pops on, there's a little bit of a country twang to it that actually was pretty inventive, and it's like, okay, I like that little style. It's like the same Kingsman score, just a little bit of twang in it. The score is good. Now, at the same time, it gets so loud and over the top that it's kind of overbearing, and sometimes it feels like it's trying too hard, almost like it's overcompensating with the lack of emotion or the lack of depth in the movie. Almost like, okay, we know you can't really feel too much for the characters and how we want you to feel for this scene, so we're gonna force you to feel the way we want to feel through the music. It feels like it's overcompensating in that regards. Now, score I like. When it comes to the soundtrack of the movie, when it throws in the popular songs, it's uninspired. Now, the first song I didn't know too much about. I guess my cousin knew it was a Prince song because his mom is into Prince, and that was kind of loud and annoying for that car sequence, but I was fine. Then there's a song choice used. They use an Elton John song, Saturday Night is Alright for Fighting. Yeah, they use that song, and I'm like, okay, it kind of makes sense. I understand because Elton John's in this movie. Yeah, Elton John's in this movie, but I'll talk about him a little bit more in the bad part of this review. But I'm like, okay, he's in the movie. They use a song. Okay, I'm fine. It wasn't until the soundtrack, the song choice for the final battle of the movie, the final climax, the big battle with the last bad guy of the film, that I got completely aggravated, and it felt like it ruined that whole scene. They do a country version of a Korn song, Word Up. A country song of that song during a fight scene, and it's a great fight scene. But I was completely annoyed by the song choice. Granted, country is not my thing, but at that same time, it felt like it completely took away any of the mood or atmosphere that action scene was trying to go for. And it felt like it only did that because, oh, there's a Stateman fighting in this scene. We gotta have a country song because he's a cowboy. It feels like that's the only reason they had that song in it. So yeah, that's the only good things I can say about this movie. The only great things I can say. And even then, all those great things, I have a bit of a mixed feeling because I can still see some things that I didn't like about each of those things. And you're probably wondering, well, It's an action movie. If you really love the action, you do like the characters, then what the heck are you complaining about? You like this movie, right? No, I didn't like the movie. Because there's more to it than just being a dumb, entertaining action film. The first one, I can understand you liking as a dumb, entertaining action film or a popcorn flick because it has those moments, but there is something deeper to the first movie. There is some dramatic moments, there is some drama, there is some really great, interesting characters, and there is some really good satire and smart humor in the first film. The second film feels like all that is completely out of the way. It's like there's no real satire, there's no real smarts to this film. It's just a dumb, bigger, better sequel, and they forgot to take the great things from the first film that really made it more than just a dumb action movie, and instead they just made a dumb action movie. And that's what's really disappointing. That's what I dislike about The Golden Circle. And you can say, oh, well, maybe they're trying to satirize the whole sequel thing where you just make it a bigger, badder movie. But it doesn't feel like they're taking those elements, taking those cliches, and doing something smart and different and inventive with them like they did in the first film. Like the first film, yes, they enforce some cliches and tropes of spy movies, but then they'll do something that goes against those tropes to really throw you off and do something interesting and unpredictable. The Golden Circle predicted pretty much everything all the way throughout, except for the things that are just bonkers and stupid as hell. There was no real surprise moment like in the first Kingsman, and it's almost like all the good things from the first Kingsman are taken away in this film because they bring back a freaking character. Yes, we know from the trailer, if you've seen any of the trailers, Colin Firth is back in this movie, and it's completely unnecessary. Yes, he was one of the great things about the first one, but it almost takes away his death from the first one by making him alive again in the second one. And not only that, they resurrect him in the most bonkers, ridiculous way that doesn't even fit the ridiculous world of Kingsman. It feels like Kingsman had ridiculous moments, it had its crazy things in it, but at the same time there was satire, there was smarts, and in this one it just feels dopey and ridiculous how they bring him back. And then they give him amnesia. Wow, we haven't seen that before. Talk about that stupid cliche. And then they make Colin Firth hallucinate butterflies in the movie. Yeah, that happens. Okay, where to even begin with the bad part of my review, the things that I hate, because even though there's things that I love of this movie, there are things that I absolutely dreaded and hated, and it really made me completely disappointed and depressed after watching the film. Okay, let's talk about Julianne Moore. Let's talk about the villain, the main villain of this film. Probably one of the worst villains I've seen all year. It's just, everything about her character is just so dumb and non-threatening. Okay, there's a few things that I can see what they were going for. They were trying to go for a maniacal type of villain that always seems perky and happy, and I guess they were trying to imitate the Emoji Movie. But instead of coming off as crazy and menacing, she just comes off as just non-threatening. Even when she orders a person to throw another person in a meat grinder and then forces that other person to eat the person from the meat grinder, and she still doesn't feel threatening. How can you do that? How is that possible? I have no idea. And her whole plan just feels dumb to me. Okay, so you're probably wondering, what is the Golden Circle? Well, the Golden Circle is an underground organization that deals in all drug trafficking. And I mean all illegal drugs. They control everything. And they're completely super secret. We don't realize that all the drug trade is being handled by one organization. I guess all the other people that smuggle it on the streets and all that stuff. I guess all of them are just sort of puppets or sort of decoys. This underground golden circle controls it all. And so Poppy, yeah, that's a very obvious name for a supervillain that controls all drug trafficking. Poppy is upset. And why is she upset? Because no one knows that she runs this whole secret organization. For the people that she runs knows about it, but the whole world, they don't know about the Golden Circle. They don't know how about this organization because this organization is secret. They don't understand the things that she's accomplished as a businesswoman, as controlling and monopolizing all illegal drugs. She can't boast of her accomplishments, and so to do this, she decides to poison all of her illegal drugs, hand it to everyone that buys, so her whole supply, her whole market is poisoned now. And everyone is going to die, everyone who does illegal drugs is going to die a horrible death, where they start growing a blue rash, where basically all of their veins start popping, and you can see their veins. Then they go loopy and start dancing. Then they go full paralysis, and then their eyes burst, and blood seeps out of their eye sockets and their nose. And even then, that was more of a laughable, bloody sequence than an actual disturbing one, surprisingly. I don't know how they managed to do that. But her plan is to poison everyone who buys her drugs, and then hold them pretty much hostage as she demands her organization to be legalized by the President of the United States. That's her plan. Now, probably if you're just thinking of it as a dumb action movie or just saying, oh, well, it's satirizing ridiculous villains for a Bond movie or a spy movie, it doesn't feel like it's doing anything smart or trying to satirize it. It just feels completely dumb. And not only that, her plan completely backfires. Now, I can understand where she was going for a little bit. She probably just completely thought, oh, of course the President of the United States will negotiate with me and make my drugs legal, because they don't want everyone in this whole huge population of people to die. So I definitely am going to get what I want. I can understand the villain thinking that in a way, but it's a huge risk. And not only that, it backfires because the President of the United States in this movie, I guess they wanted to go political and try to do the whole Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton thing in this movie, because the president is like, well, I'm not going to give in to her demands. That's stupid. I win this way. If I let her kill all the people that do drugs, then no one in the world is going to buy any more drugs, and she's out of a business, and I get rid of and I basically win the war on drugs. And so he's like, you stupid bitch, I'm going to do that. And so like the vice president or secretary or something, I don't know what she is technically, is like, well, you can't do that because there's some innocent people that do drugs too. There's not all drug people. It's not all cartel or anything like that. Sometimes there's people that just experiment with drugs and stuff. It's like, I don't care. They shouldn't be in my country if they do drugs. And it's really stupid in this movie. And every villain is terrible in this movie. Every villain is stupid. The only villains where I can actually see their motivation and see where they're coming from is the freaking side villain who is part of the Golden Circle. You know, the guy with the robotic arm who happens to be a character from the first Kingsman who wants revenge on Eggsy because he was he was one of the recruits. He was the one at the very end that almost gets saved, but then Yeah, so anyway, which I forgot. If it wasn't for that scene, I would have completely forgot about that character. He's the only one that actually feels smart and has a motivation. Plus, there's a twist villain, which I won't go into details. He has a better motivation and a better story and a better backstory than the main villains of this film. And he's only like a villain for the last act of the movie because it's a twist. Oh, also speaking of the main villain of our movie, Poppy, played by Julianne Moore, she has a 50s obsession, and it's like, okay, that's a little quirk that this villain could have. But then she goes and does things like kidnapping Elton John, just to have as her personal musician. Which, by the way, I'll get more into it when I talk about Elton John, but he has more screen time than both Halle Berry, Channing Tatum, and Jeff Bridges combined. I thought it was just going to be a cameo. Nope. He's a running gag through the movie. And she has robot dogs and robot servants and just... And every scene with her is just so unnecessary. It's like they had to have her in it because she's the main villain and they had to have moments for her. But all these moments are either just her giving exposition, talking about her plan, figuring out what her plan is, or just killing off her crew members. Yeah, there's 2 crew member deaths of her villain organization, and it feels so pointless that the characters being in the movie felt completely pointless because they both are introduced and they both die throughout the movie because she's a villain and they do things she doesn't like. Yeah, so this was, like I said, probably the worst main villain in a movie so far this year. Or either the worst or very close to it. I'm not sure. Well, there was a lot of unnecessary filler in this movie, with a lot of globetrotting in the most ridiculous reasons for going to different places, and unnecessary side stories, kind of like how apparently in this movie, Eggsy, you know how he had sex with the princess at the end of the first film, and how it was just a bit of a mockery of how James Bond always gets the girl in the end? Yeah, they're an actual couple in this movie. And it's actually serious, and they actually get engaged. And it's a major plot point of the movie. I don't know how negative people thought of that ending scene with him having sex with her, towards the end of the scene where he had sex with her. I remember one reviewer saying that, I remember looking on Rotten Tomatoes, and one of the critic reviews, that one of the few rotten ones at the time, gave it a rotten score because they considered it rape. And this is the kind of reviewer that tries to find sexism in every movie that they look at. And it's just, wow. I guess, I don't know, maybe it blew up and a lot of people claimed it to be sexist because they claimed it was rape. But, I don't know. Did he get backlash and so they made her an actual legitimate girlfriend in this movie for the sake of that? I don't know. It just feels weird and out of nowhere in this movie. And ultimately, she just simply becomes the love interest and one of the main reasons why he has to go and try to stop these bad people, because she gets sick just like all the other people that use drugs in the film. Like, was his friends not enough? Because similar to the first one, where everyone was fighting and it kept showing his friends fighting too, because they were getting involved and infected by that whole scenario. It wasn't enough to have just his friend drugged in this movie, which he is, one of them. They had to have that too, I guess. I guess the reasons of her wiping out all of the Kingsmen wasn't enough either. They had to also tack in that. I don't know. Also, it feels like Colin Firth being in the movie, having amnesia and having to get back into the swing of things. Also, whether he's delusional or not is just an added side story in this movie too that feels like it bloats the movie and just makes it fairly meaningless. Except when he starts having delusions and thinking, oh, this is going to be a bad guy, and then, as you'd expect from a predictable movie around these same lines, you predict, oh, he's not actually going to be delusional and that person actually is a traitor. Even though I was hoping he wasn't, I was hoping it was delusional to have that twist. Nope, it's predictable twist. Predictable. They also add the political side with the president deciding, oh, we're not going to give in demands, we're just going to let all the drug users die. And stack them up in cages in a big stadium. Yeah, that actually happens in this movie too. They stack them up in metal cages inside a stadium. Big cranes just stack them on top of each other. What the hell? So yeah, the plot itself. The worst thing of this movie for me. It's bloated, it's a mess, a lot of side stories added for no reason. Like, I can understand if it was more of a team dynamic like Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2. That had a lot of stuff in it, a lot of character development, but it did it in a way that was actually good and didn't feel bloated. It felt a little chaotic with how it edited between each character, but at the same time, it didn't feel bloated, it didn't feel like a mess, it didn't feel like unnecessary filler, like this movie. Oh, and everything about Elton John in this movie, playing himself, was just so freaking cringeworthy. It was the cringiest thing in this entire movie for me. It would have been fine if it was just a cameo, but it's throughout the entire movie as a running gag, and it just feels random and pointless. I imagine that it's maybe trying to imitate the whole princess subplot in the first one. You know, how we had a little bit of a story with the princess, because she was one of the celebrities captured, right, in the first one. So it's a view of that captivity. Maybe it's trying to emulate that, but at the same time, it doesn't feel like that, and it just feels pointless, and it's cringe-worthy comedy. I mean, there's a point where he's fighting henchmen himself, and there's a point where we're having this climactic battle with Colin Firth and Eggsy, so Colin Firth and Taron Egerton, wiping out all these henchmen in the huge 50s base, right? Killing all these people, and it keeps cutting back to Elton John fighting two henchmen, and at one frickin' point, Elton John jumps up, does a basically Mortal Kombat kick at this henchman, and it goes in slow motion, and as he's about to kick the henchman, he turns to the camera, winks, looks back, and then the motion proceeds, and why? See, this is some of the random stupid humor that I don't expect from Kingsman, because the first one was smart. This one's just dumb. Maybe this is why Matthew Vaughn doesn't... Maybe this is why he doesn't do sequels. Because this is like the first movie that I've seen of his that he's actually done a sequel of his previous film. Like Kick-Ass 2, he didn't direct and write Kick-Ass 2. He did this one, so maybe this is why he doesn't like to do sequels, because he sucks at sequels, I guess. I don't know. This is one of the worst films I've seen from him, which is sad to say, because I like the director. I've liked almost every single one of his movies. Heck, X-Men First Class is one of my favorite X-Men movies. Kick-Ass is a really kick-ass movie. I love it. Kingsman, The Golden Circle, so freaking disappointing. And one of the worst offenses of this movie is killing off a major character from the first one towards the beginning, and we imagine, okay, it's showing Kingsman being destroyed. You imagine there's going to be death, right? There's going to be some major characters die. But a major character dies, and it's so uneventful, so underwhelming, that I figured that this character wasn't really dead and was going to come back in the movie. Nope, didn't happen. That character died. It just feels like a spit in the face to the first one, especially when it was a major character that can pretty much be a main character. This person could be classified as a main character along with Eggsy in the first one, because they have their own character development as well. Dies so uneventfully in this movie that it's like, who cares? A lot of this movie feels like a slap in the face of the first one, and I'm surprised that people that love the first one still really like this one. I imagine that only the people that thought the first one was like dumb entertainment fun will probably still think this is dumb entertainment fun, but those of us that really love the first one, this is just such a low bar, just such a drop in quality that it's just so disappointing. And so for me, Kingsman, The Golden Circle, I'm regrettably going to still give it 2.5 stars, because a lot of those great things balance out the terrible things, and so ultimately, even though I'm very disappointed in this movie and consider it closer to a 2-star or maybe even lower, there's enough good things objectively that I have to give it an average score. So 2.5 for Kingsman, The Golden Circle. So what did you think about Kingsman, The Golden Circle? Did you like it? Did you hate it? What did you think? Go ahead and comment below. And if you like this video and you want to see more movie reviews or countdowns, please subscribe and check them out. As always, this is Bruce Gifford, and this was Just My Opinion.